It's a legendary basketball matchup that's going to be played in a baseball stadium, and it's a football game between Duke and Indiana. Day after New Year, or day after Christmas, actually, at Yankee Stadium in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl, we bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us break down Indiana at 6-6, Duke at 7-5, or I think some Blue Devil fans would like to think, Mike, that they're actually 8-4, or should be. But the referees had something else to say after reviewing the play against Miami, and that seemed to be where Duke's season took a tumble, Mike. They started off 6-1. They beat Georgia Tech on the road, and that appeared to be a big win at the time when we expected the Yellow Jackets to be possibly the best team in the division. Then they lost to Miami on the crazy play at the end. They lost 3 consecutive games and were really not competitive against the likes of North Carolina and some other teams. So set us up with Duke coming into this game.
Yeah, well, there's that old saying, don't let one loss turn into 2. Well, when Duke had that loss happen to them against Miami, they let one loss turn into 4 straight, including that 42-34 loss to cap it off against Virginia before winning the finale against Wake Forest. Duke is a team that has been known under David Cutcliffe to be a squad that doesn't beat themselves. And what we saw in those 4 games is they just continually beat themselves, whether it be with turnovers or penalties. Duke doesn't do anything really spectacularly well, but they do everything well enough to win games that are close and grind it out. I think that they have a team that is more than capable of competing with Indiana the day after Christmas in this bowl game. I think it's a game they'll definitely get up for.
Yeah, Indiana's a team that surprisingly, so the Hoosiers start 4-0. They played one Power 5 game. That was actually against another ACC team in Wake Forest. It went down to the wire. The Hoosiers pulled that one out, so they're sitting there at 4-0. Then they start Big Ten play, and they lose 6 consecutive games. They rally late to become bowl eligible for just the second time since 1993. This is not a successful program that Kevin Wilson has taken over, but he's slowly bringing them to respectability. And if you saw the way the Hoosiers played against Ohio State and Michigan, those were 2 of the better performances of the season. Toss in the game against Iowa, they only lost by 8. They took Michigan to overtime, and that's when the Wolverines were shutting down everyone defensively. Ohio State, Indiana the Buckeyes had to survive with Indiana at the 4-yard line to tie the score or possibly go for the 2-point play to win it. So they came up and really played their best football against some of the better teams in the country, but against the likes of the middle tier of the Big Ten, they got knocked around. Nate Sudfeld's one of the better passers, not only in the Big Ten, but across the country, and has been for a few years. He just can't stay healthy. 24 touchdowns, 5 picks for Indiana. It's got 3 receivers that all contribute consistently, and Simi Cobbs caught 54 for almost 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. Ricky Jones, 50 catches, again, 817 yards, 5 touchdowns. And a player that I really like, Mitchell Page, caught 46 balls and 5 touchdowns. But what separated Indiana this year from past Indiana teams, and the reason they rose from 3 or 4 wins up to 6 and again stood toe-to-toe with the likes of Michigan and Ohio State, was that they bulked up the front 7 on defense. They're much quicker. They're much more able to contain offenses. They're not a good defense by any stretch, but they're not an embarrassing defense, and didn't get run over by the better teams in the Big Ten this year. And also they balanced the passing game that they've been able to do very well under Kevin Wilson. And if you know much about Kevin Wilson, he came in from Oklahoma and brought the spread attack and the 5 wides to Indiana, and they've really slung the ball all over the field and scored points, but they didn't have the ground game. Tevin Coleman went to the NFL. He really rushed the football well, one of the better backs in the Big Ten last year. This year was Jordan Howard. The only thing that slowed him down were injuries. He ran for 12-13 at 6.2 per carry, 9 touchdowns, and ran right through Michigan for 238 yards. They could not stop him. And again, the Hoosiers came within that close of beating Michigan and Ohio State. So difficult game possibly for Duke. This is not an attractive affair, Mike, but it could be a close one.
Yeah, so with Indiana, like you mentioned, they played in a lot of big games this year. They had one really bad loss to Rutgers, and they weren't very competitive against Penn State, but you want to give them a pass in that game because it's a week after that heartbreaker against Ohio State that kind of went down to the wire. But other than that, they went toe-to-toe with a lot of big-time teams this year. Number 7 Michigan State was a game that kind of got away from them late, but they were within a touchdown of Iowa. They were within a touchdown of Michigan. They were within a touchdown of Ohio State. And Coach Wilson definitely has Indiana heading in the right direction with the way he's been recruiting the last couple of seasons and the way they're competing on defense. So Indiana has kind of come up from the cellar. They have not been a very good football program for a long time, as you mentioned, but they're definitely heading in the right direction. This is a big game for them. On the other side of the ball, for Duke and Thomas Sirk, I think this is kind of a character game. They were able to finish their regular season with a W over Wake Forest. It was an unconvincing showing. I mean, they did win 27-21, but Wake Forest, while they've improved, is a team that Duke should have handled, and they didn't. And they kind of, like I said, they let one loss against Miami, one that definitely should have gone Duke's way. It was kind of taken away from them, and they let that turn to 4 consecutive losses, including, giving up 66 points against North Carolina the week after that loss to Miami. So you could tell the focus just wasn't there down the stretch for the Blue Devils, which is really uncharacteristic of a David Cutcliffe coach team. But I think it's really important for Duke to be able to establish any semblance of a run game. I mean, Thomas Sirk has been able to kind of do it all. He's been able to throw the ball at quarterback and also keep it and run. They use him a ton in this offense. It kind of reminds me a lot of how Clemson uses Deshaun Watson. I mean, they're not afraid to run him down there for the Tigers, and he's been extremely, extremely impressive this year, and he's going to be a part of the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And he's a guy that's done great things in a similar kind of offensive structure to Thomas Sirk and Duke. And Duke also has a good wide receiver on the outside, Max McCaffrey, brother of another Heisman candidate, Christian McCaffrey. Max McCaffrey has 48 catches this season for over 600 yards and 5 touchdowns, and this is senior season, so he's a playmaker as well. So Duke does have an ability to put some points up. Like I said before, they don't do anything spectacularly well, but they're a team that has averaged almost 31 points per game this season. Their defense hasn't allowed many big plays. Jeremy Cash at safety is a big reason why. You'll see him in the NFL next year. He's a big-time player. But I think for Duke, it's all about stopping the passing attack of Indiana and Nate Sudfeld, who's gone for over 3,000 yards this year and 24 touchdown passes. And Jordan Howard is a guy, like you said, who can really run the ball. So it's going to be a highly competitive game and one that Duke has to prepare for and prepare for at an adequate level, a level that they hadn't really prepared for down the stretch, you could argue.
Yeah, and a bit of a disclaimer for Indiana going to Happy Valley. You mentioned the letdown after playing Ohio State and really leaving it all on the field. They also lost Nate Sudfeld in that game, had to go with a backup quarterback. They lost Jordan Howard, their 1,200-yard running back against Ohio State. He didn't play against Penn State. Thomas Sirk, interesting to note, and I think this is fairly consistent across the country, but even more emphasized here. In the wins, Mike, he's got 15 TDs and 4 picks. In the losses, 2 TDs and 4 picks. Obviously, much more productive. So they need him, even though it's not a dynamic passing offense, as you mentioned off the top. They're very balanced on offense. They rely on the passing game, and Sirk's got to avoid the turnovers and be productive in the passing game. David Cutcliffe, what a job he's done at Duke. When we rated coaches, you and I and some other ACC bloggers before the season, we had good things to say about David Cutcliffe. Despite the losing record overall, you've got to put it into context. This team is now playing a 4th consecutive bowl game. The last 2 years really outclassed by more talented teams in Arizona State and Texas A&M. This year, they get an Indiana team that they could possibly handle. It's a pretty even matchup. I'd even give the Blue Devils a bit of a nod because of the defense, where Indiana is very porous on defense. And maybe Duke wins a first bowl game since, Mike, did you see this? 1961.
Yeah, I'm going to take Duke as well, but like you said, it's going to be a close game. A lot of that does have to do with the porous defense of Indiana. Duke's defense, with Jeremy Cash leading the way, I think they'll make enough plays on that side of the ball in some crucial situations to win them the game. But Indiana is an offense that you can't really fool around with. They're going to come out. They can throw the ball all over the field, and Howard can run the ball very well as also. And this is a team that can easily come in and beat Duke, just as Duke can beat Indiana on a given day. So this is really a toss-up matchup. I'm going to take Duke to win just because I think they'll make one more play on offense than Indiana makes on defense.
If you're wiped out after Christmas and you're an ACC football fan, hey, the 26th is the place to be on the couch with, we talked about the Independence Bowl, the Sun Bowl, and now the Pinstripe Bowl. with Duke taking on Indiana. Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC breaking things down for us. Mike, it's always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Mark.